President of the Alabama World Affairs Council, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to our first session for the academic year of 2025-2026. Thank you all for coming out. Our ranks have been thinned a little bit because, as you might be aware, this is September 30th, and the fiscal year begins tomorrow, and there is not an agreement unless somebody has some breaking news that I haven't heard. So a few of our folks are affected by that and are doing the drills that those of us who've worked in government have long been used to doing over the years now. Best of luck to them, and let's hope that we can get on with things in a timely manner. I'm going to turn it over to Al Allenback of Global Ties Alabama, as well as now a board member here at the Alabama World Affairs Council. But before I do, just a few admin notes. First of all, thank you for coming out. It's great to see such a good crowd to start the year off. We're very excited about our guest, Ambassador Richard LeBaron. Al will be introducing him a little bit later. Upcoming programs. I'm still looking for something on October 14th, so hold that for right now, and let me see what we might be able to arrange. But November 4th is on right now, and that is going to be Dr. Michael Slobochkov, who is a Russia expert and has a book out on Russia's hegemonic world order that we will have copies here for sale. And Michael, a longtime friend of mine, and he is really immersed in the topic. So we're fortunate to have him in the area at Troy University in the political science department. I'm looking forward to Michael holding forth on Russia and what's going on in that right now. But and then stand by for more. We'll also do a program in December, and that date's escaping me with the exact date then, but it'll be early December, and that will be Dr. Pfeiffer from Air University talking about a place that used to be not heard of much, but has been in the news much lately, Greenland, and what the issues are with Greenland. Good chance to get up on that as it gets a little colder here. You'll feel quite warm once they describe how cold it gets in Greenland. When I was in the Air Force, that was always the threat that they held over you was, you're going to Thule, Greenland if you don't shape up. Didn't get there. One of the things we're excited about and we're increasing are the partnerships that we're doing. And I think you're seeing evidence of it tonight. You'll see evidence of it with more of our programs. And this partnership in particular is with Global Ties Alabama. I'm going to let Al come up and tell you more about that and then introduce our guest speaker. Thank you again for being here this evening.
Well, good evening. It's a great crowd tonight. It's been 14 years that Ray White, who was retired Chancellor of Troy University, Montgomery, joined the Global Ties Alabama Diplomatic Corps. He was a dedicated supporter of promoting diplomatic and collaborative relations worldwide. Locally, as the Chancellor here, Ray allowed GTA to have office space in this building. And almost all of our international visitors, they land in Huntsville, that's where the organization is, but they all end up down here because they want to see Montgomery, and they're very interested in our civil rights history. So they'll come to Montgomery and go to Selma. We'll have a couple dinners for them, then they'll go back. But Ray made that happen, and in celebration of our 60th anniversary, we'd like to recognize his exemplary citizen diplomacy, the right and responsibility of all Americans to influence the foreign relations of our nation, one handshake at a time. So Ray, could you come up and let me give you this little goodie? Thank you so much on behalf of Global Ties Alabama.
Appreciate it.
All right, thank you.
One handshake at a time.
So Global Ties is celebrating our 60th anniversary this year. We're kind of a boots on the ground organization. Last year, before our funding was cut this year by this administration, we resettled 49 State Department recognized refugee families, 176 husbands, wives, and children. And many of these people have helped the United States. So many of them helped our troops in Afghanistan during that struggle. Earlier this summer, we hosted 22 Mandela Foundation scholars. They visited our civil rights operations here in Montgomery. In August, Jean and I hosted 10 Africans who were participating in the International Visitor Leadership Program at dinner at our home. And it was a truly marvelous evening, really, really great. If you would like to know more about Global Ties, there's the information. Just check it out. If you're interested in hosting a family for dinner or interested in volunteering, please take a look, and we'd be happy to have you. But part of this is this partnership with the Alabama World Affairs Council, and we're very excited that this has all worked out. I mean, it just worked out. Everything was great, and I'm happy to be part of the team that's bringing you tonight's guest speaker, Ambassador Richard LeBaron. Ambassador LeBaron is a non-resident senior fellow with the Atlantic Council's Middle East programs, focusing on the Gulf and social change in the Middle East and North Africa region. A career diplomat with over 30 years experience, he served as U.S. Ambassador to Kuwait and Deputy Chief of Mission in London, acting as Charge d'Affaires. His prior roles included Deputy Chief of Mission in Tel Aviv, Minister Counselor in Cairo, and senior positions in Washington on Middle East policy, including at the National Security Council and the State Department. His earlier postings included Lisbon, Tunis, New Delhi, and Managua. He holds a BA from the University of Colorado and an MA from the George Washington University. And also of interest, Ambassador LeBaron is married to Miss Zoe Engels, who has family roots in Montgomery and maintains ties and friendships with many of you in the area. Both Zoe and the ambassador continue a legacy of educational support initiated by Zoe's mother, Mrs. Mickey Engels, many decades ago. Please join me in welcoming Ambassador Richard LeBaron.
I feel like I'm so far away from you. I think I can walk and talk, but I can't remember the whole speech. So I'm going to have to go back to the podium, and then in the Q&A, I'll walk around a little bit more. But I've met some of you. I'd like to meet all of you before the evening's over. It's such a privilege to be here. I am sort of an adopted Alabaman. I've been married to 2 women from Alabama. One Mobile, she's passed away, and now one from Montgomery. So I consider myself just lucky. And I have still family of my wife down in Mobile. So it's been interesting, and it's been interesting also to support with Zoe the effort that she initiated with her sisters for her mother's memory at the Booker T. Washington Magnet School, where they support aspiring artists in specific projects. But let me get back over here so I can figure out what I'm actually here for. And you've noticed in the news probably, is this one on too, John? So,
No, I just turned it off.
okay. And I also wanted to mention Global Ties. I'm on the National Advisory Board for Global Ties, which is basically the people who arrange international visits for young people, for the State Department and for other organizations. And one of the things that I learned as a diplomat, an active diplomat, was there is no substitute for personal knowledge of a country. People who come to this country change something about how they feel about it. And it's nuanced, it might not be stark, but it's real. And they go back to their own country and are able to converse with some knowledge with their peers and their families about the United States. And that's a really, really powerful form of diplomacy, which I'm delighted to continue to be part of. Now, permit me to start with a couple of disclaimers. First, in many ways, there's no such thing as the Middle East. People who live in that region rarely think of themselves that way. This is a region of 20 plus countries, and they all have important differences of history, tradition, governance, and politics. So while we may group them together for convenience, in order to understand their behavior, it is absolutely necessary to understand those countries individually. Second disclaimer, I am by no means an expert in all 20 of those countries, and I'd be a bit suspicious of anyone who came to you and claimed that broad expertise. I was a diplomatic practitioner. I served in 4 U.S. embassies in the area and worked for several years in Washington on U.S. policy for the region. And what I will say today reflects that particular perspective. This evening, I'm going to start with a few remarks about the recent history of U.S. involvement in the Middle East. And yes, I'm going to use the term Middle East. And then I'm going to make brief remarks on 3 topics: relations with Iran, the status of the Abraham Accords, and finally, the tragic situation between the Israelis and Palestinians. I'll have a few things to say about the agreement that was announced yesterday by President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu. And after that, I'd like to hear your views and leave plenty of time to respond to questions. Let's start with a little very recent history, which happens to coincide roughly with the year I joined the Foreign Service. I worked under 6 presidents in my career and served at the State Department under 11 secretaries of state. I don't believe any of these men and women was eager to engage in the thorny issues of the Middle East. Some of them absolutely resisted. That didn't work out. I think we often make the mistake of focusing on the immediate present and putting aside events of the recent past. So let me very briefly describe the significance of several events since 1978 that I believe shape much of what we see today. Going back 1 year before I came into government, the Camp David Accords in 1978 proved peace was and is possible between Israel and former enemy Arab states. The Israel-Egypt Treaty was a high point of American diplomacy. It was followed years later by a similar bilateral treaty between Jordan and Israel. The next year, the Iranian Revolution and taking of American hostages cast U.S.-Iranian relations into a long, deep freeze that continues today. More on Iran later. Those events, the hostage taking, had a profound impact on U.S. domestic politics as well. The first 1991 Gulf War was a success for a coalition military operation protecting U.S. and Gulf country interests. It also resulted in U.S. forces being permanently stationed in the Gulf and nurtured expectations that the U.S. would be a permanent protector of Gulf states. The Madrid Agreement of 1991 and the subsequent Oslo Accords in 1993 provided a blueprint for a permanent settlement between Israel and the Palestinians. However tattered, that blueprint is largely what shapes current conversations about Israeli-Palestinian peacemaking. The wars in Afghanistan and Iraq following 9/11 demonstrated the limits of military power and set implicit political limits on what the U.S. is willing to do militarily around the world. The Arab Spring 2010 to 13 demonstrated that people care about how they are ruled and who is ruling them. The subsequent repression and civil wars demonstrated the determination of authoritarian governments to prevent any significant movement towards democratic governance. So I've scratched the surface of what went on in these recent decades. What constantly surprises me is that unless you were involved in some way with these events, as I know a good number of you were, it all seems to have faded from our national psyche very quickly. With that in mind, let me turn to a few thoughts on Iran. The recent strikes by Israel and the United States have reduced the short-term risk of Iran developing nuclear weapons. However, considerable nuclear fuel is still unaccounted for, and international inspections have ended. Iran's aspirations to obtain nuclear capabilities will likely continue, and attempts by Israel and the international community to prevent their development will also need to continue. In the longer term, there will need to be change within Iran for the country to become a full member of the international community. That change will need to come from within. One of the consequences of our 46-year gap in diplomatic relations with Iran is a huge vacuum in our understanding of what is going on in the country. It's important to remember that Iran is not a minor country made up of only determined religious fundamentalists. It is the second most populous country in the larger region after Egypt, far surpassing the combined populations of Saudi Arabia and the other Gulf states. It has a diverse population made up of several ethnic groups. It has an estimated 98% literacy rate, and more young women than young men attend university. My point here on Iran is a simple one. Iran has been around for a long time and it isn't going anywhere. Under any leadership, it will continue to play a significant political, economic, and military role. Gulf states, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, others, know they need to accommodate Iran and have taken steps to improve relations in recent years. The United States needs to be prepared for both negative and positive change in Iran's politics and needs to think through the implications. Iran does not need to be any country's permanent enemy. And it is not in the U.S. interest to view Iran in those terms, just as it is not in Iran's interest to continue to vilify the United States and vow to destroy Israel. I'm worried about, there's two people in the back of the room that don't have a chair, and they keep worrying. Okay, all right. I'm not that good looking, but all right. I just was worried about you. All right. This year marks the 5th anniversary of the Abraham Accords. After abandoning its plan for a comprehensive Israel-Palestinian agreement, the first Trump administration pursued agreements to normalize relations between Israel and other Mideast countries and continues this effort. Normalize, by the way, means simply to have formal diplomatic relations. So far, the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, and Morocco are core members of the Abraham Accords along with Israel. During the last few years, both the Biden and Trump administrations have worked to bring other countries into the fold, with the main effort focused on Saudi Arabia. Any chance of normalizing Saudi-Israeli ties became more remote given the war in Gaza. Saudi Arabia has made it clear that without the creation of a Palestinian state, there will be no diplomatic ties with Israel. Prime Minister Netanyahu has made it equally clear, at least until yesterday, that there will never be a Palestinian state while he is in charge. Meanwhile, the main Arab proponent of the Accords, the United Arab Emirates, has stated publicly that a formal Israeli move to annex the West Bank would lead to a break in its ties to Israel. So the prognosis for growth in the number of Arab states that have formal ties with Israel is not good. The recent attack on Hamas leaders in Qatar push the process a little further into the deep freeze. Let me just say that I believe that all states should have formal diplomatic ties with Israel. Israel is not going to disappear, and clearly, withholding diplomatic recognition has not provided Arab states with any notable diplomatic leverage over Israel's actions. One can debate whether Arab states could exert more influence if they had diplomatic missions in Jerusalem and regular exchanges with Israeli leaders and officials. But at this particular juncture, I understand why no Arab leader would think that now is the best time. But Abraham Accords or not, I think it's important to accept that every state in the Arab Middle East, implicitly, if not publicly, accepts the fact of Israel's existence and its legitimacy as a state. Iran and its badly decimated surrogates, such as Hezbollah, are the holdouts. So let me now make a few observations about Gaza and Israel. First, the Hamas attack on Israel almost 2 years ago is not something that can be forgotten or forgiven. It was a terror attack by terrorists who knew exactly what they were doing. Their intention was to traumatize Israel. The killing and kidnapping did just that and continues to do so, particularly because 48 Israeli hostages remain, with only 20 thought to be still alive. Second, there is no equivalence between sympathy for Palestinians or support for a Palestinian state and sympathy for Hamas. Hamas not only attacks Israelis and the idea of Israel, but also terrorizes Palestinians who disagree with its goals or methods. So far, Hamas has demonstrated little interest in ending this conflict. It has been perceived to be in its interest to continue it, with the suffering of the Palestinian people an element of their strategy to isolate Israel. Third, as I noted, Hamas succeeded in traumatizing Israelis, and that trauma continues. But it is important to understand that there was never a remote possibility that Hamas would march on Jerusalem and defeat Israel. Some Israelis, encouraged by their leadership, considered the attack an existential threat to Israel. Casting the conflict in this way as a fight for Israel's survival has likely prolonged the war and caused untold suffering. Fifth, until yesterday, the Israeli government showed very little interest in ending the conflict and continued to attack Gaza without a clear plan for ending the war or managing the days, months, and years after it ends. Many Israelis believe that the Netanyahu government needed this war, or at least some war, to survive. Until yesterday's proposals, there was clearly, to borrow a military term that many of you are familiar with, there was clearly no end state defined for this conflict. Sixth, the collective punishment of Palestinians in Gaza, represented by the huge number of civilian casualties, ineffective and capricious humanitarian aid flows, destruction of infrastructure, and constant demands that the population move from place to place, has led many to claim that Israel is committing genocide. The very fact that there is a debate over whether Israel is committing genocide is indicative of the way this conflict has come to be seen around the world. As this tragic conflict drags on, American public opinion is trending against Israel, especially among young people. The negative trend is much worse in almost every other country in the world. Whether Israeli leaders wish to admit it or not, Israel needs friends around the world. I count myself among pro-Israel Americans who understand the need for and the legitimacy of Israel. But my attitude toward Israel does not prevent me from supporting the aspirations of the Palestinians for their own state. Let me make a few comments now on the plan agreed to by Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Trump yesterday. And this is going to be dependent on me being able to read my handwriting because I made these notes just today, so I may stumble a little bit. But if you've been following the news, you know that yesterday Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Trump announced, I think, a 20-point plan about solving this long ongoing war. Surprisingly, it was very surprisingly comprehensive. And I say that because so far we've been talking about ceasefire, return of a few hostages, ceasefire, return of a few hostages, sort of an iterative process. This is a comprehensive plan to not only end the war and bring back the hostages, but to rebuild Gaza. So the whole thing is quite comprehensive with a lot of actors. The plan includes decommissioning of Hamas fighters, completely demilitarizing Hamas. It includes new aid flows and rehabilitation of Gaza's infrastructure. It includes a UN role and Red Crescent participation. Red Crescent is the Muslim Red Cross. It talks about Palestinian governance. It starts with the oversight by a board of peace led by President Trump, assisted by former Prime Minister Blair. Among the elements that's interesting is no one's forced to leave Gaza. You've all heard about plans in the past that have been mentioned for just getting everybody out of Gaza and starting over. That is not part of this plan. Very specifically, no one is forced to leave, and people who do leave are free to return under this plan. Arab countries and others will form a stabilization force, a military security force for Gaza. It includes the element of no Israeli annexation of the Gaza Strip. And it mentions a pathway to Palestinian self-determination and statehood. A lot of these elements I mentioned because they are so different from what the discussion has been in the past. I mean, Israel has long been allergic to any sort of non-US involvement, any sort of UN, European, international involvement in peacemaking efforts with the Palestinians. In this case, there's a huge element of Arab forces, of international bodies and so forth. So this is a big break, a big difference for Israel. The question is, it's an ambitious plan. What are its chances of survival? It's one thing to put out a plan, it's another thing for everybody to execute it. I would say two things. First of all, Hamas has to make a decision, a critical decision at this point, whether they're going to, proceed to pursue this war. And I think there's no guarantee that they will say that this plan is acceptable. There's no guarantee at all. As much as they are backed into a pretty ugly corner, Hamas, terrorism is what they do. Attacking Israel is what they do. Whether they can stop doing what they do and take a different course is hard to know. And I think we'll know within the next week or two. Plans like this, of course, will be unlikely to survive in their present form. I mean, no plan in the Middle East ever survives as the architects of it originally decided. So everybody interested in the plan, everybody who has a role, will try to make adjustments. And certainly Israel will, because Israel has never experienced this sort of international involvement. So I would imagine if the plan goes forward, they'll try to make sure that that international involvement is very well defined very limited, or somewhat limited, and doesn't interfere with their ability to defend themselves on their own as they see fit. The plan absolutely is notable for its Arab state participation in an area right next to Israel. It's no forced migration, as I said before. I mean, this is taking this off the table, I think, was absolutely a requirement for Arab states to agree to be involved at all. This idea of throwing Gazans out of Gaza was a non-starter from the beginning, but for the Arabs to be involved in this new plan, they told the Trump administration, I'm sure, that can't be part of this thing. We won't be part of that if it is. Finally, I think this is, it's very interesting that this administration has taken on this challenge in the way that the president described that he would be in charge of this effort, the leader of it. I mean, this is a president who didn't really want to be involved in the Middle East at all, except in business deals, frankly. I mean, the Abraham Accords were his signature political contribution, but he does not, the Republican Party and the president, I think, were quite suspicious of involvement in foreign adventures. So it's very interesting that he has sort of put himself and his reputation at the very heart of this project. Now, he may be thinking, Prime Minister Netanyahu may be thinking, well, Hamas is not going to accept it, so we're just go to plan B at that point. And the president has said he's going to support the Israelis in a plan B of going after Hamas, continuing to go after Hamas if they have to and they don't accept the plan. So we'll see what happens. But it's interesting, it's a big plan, and stay tuned is all I can say. But I hope some of the observations about how this is different from anything we've seen before on Israel's borders will inform your judgment about what's going on. I know we want to discuss these matters further, but let me stop with a couple of very brief final thoughts. First, in my experience, most people in the Middle East want one thing. They want normal lives for themselves, for their children. They want to send their kids to school. They want to have some assurance that they're safe. They want to have some idea that their leaders are in their court, and they want some idea of economic opportunity. They don't wake up in Arab countries or Israel thinking about, let's go to war. They say, how can we get out of this? How can we have a normal life? It sounds so simple, and it's such an extraordinary tall order in much of the region. But I think it's important to think about that a little bit. Normal life is a distant dream for far too many people. Second and finally, just a brief comment, not related directly to my topic today, but one near and dear to my heart. I'd like to say a few words about public service. Many of you have served your country and your communities in various ways, be it as military officers, state and local officials, judges, educators, volunteers. That service should be honored and not subject to political litmus tests. I'm not going to belabor this point because I think you all know that our country will not be strengthened by division. American resilience cannot be taken for granted. I thank you all for what you have done and all you will do as part of your commitment to this great American experiment. And I look forward to our discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Master.
Okay.
Appreciate that. Given us a lot to dive into right here. Let me take the president's prerogative and ask the first question, and that is, we say two-state solution. We say a Palestinian state. What do you think a Palestinian state looks like?
Well, it's a complicated question, obviously, but Palestinian state for a Palestinian wants to look like any other state. Wants to be a state where their citizens are, they identify as citizens of a state called Palestine, that they rule themselves, that they control their own borders. But a Palestinian state's going to come through negotiation, and some of that negotiation is going to probably involve how having a Palestinian state does not become a threat to its neighbors, especially Israel. And that's not something that's impossible to work out. It's something that there hasn't been the will to work out. So it's going to look like a state with less military power, I think. It may end up not being a state at all. I mean, at the end of the day, people may say this is not going to work. So we're going to stay here in this territory where we are now, and maybe Israel will become a state of Arabs and Israelis, Palestinians and Israelis, the so-called binational state. It's not out of the realm of possibility. It's also the view of some Palestinians that, look, we're reproducing faster than the Israelis are, so we just stick around, We just stay here and until we become the predominant force and see how the political dynamic shifts. But, people think it's impossible, and frankly, a lot of people in Israel have tried to make it impossible. I mean, the settlements enterprise in the West Bank, as a large part of that is to make a contiguous Palestinian state impossible to construct. And the Israelis have been very effective, and this long predates Prime Minister Netanyahu. Every Israeli prime minister has supported settlements since the beginning of Israel. And every US administration has waffled. We say we don't support settlements, and then we look the other way. So, when we say that a Palestinian state may not be possible, part of the blame falls right on our heads.
Thank you. Question in the room?
It's partially a two-part question.
Mm-hmm.
Question number one, or statement number one, I guess, is my perception and my understanding is one of the reasons why the Arab states were opposed to the resettlement of the Palestinians, is they didn't want the Palestinians coming to their backyard.
Mm-hmm.
Jordan drove the large numbers of the refugees in Lebanon were driven out of Jordan. They're there not because of the Israelis, they were there by another Arab state. So having said that, though, what are the risks of Arab military creating a peace force in Gaza or elsewhere with what the United States has experienced with our, quote, allies in Afghanistan and elsewhere with the insider threat that Arab militaries have already been radicalized?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I frankly have not really thought about that question very much. I think you touched on one aspect of it. The Arab states, Egypt and Jordan specifically, do not want Palestinians, any more Palestinians than they already have. Jordan had an existential moment with Black September with the Palestinians and barely survived. Egypt is just a fading regional power that's afraid of anything at this point. But I don't see, they would be, this force would be within Gaza, not in Israel. It would not be interacting with any Israelis. So in my view, the greatest threat would come from Hamas splinter groups or more radical groups who would try to sabotage those forces, and that would create a conflict. My mind goes to, the Marine barracks in Lebanon or something like that, where you've got an Egyptian force there and some Palestinian Islamic Jihad or some group like that decides to blow that up and hopefully blow up the whole enterprise. So that's where I would see the sort of security threats.
I'm going to exercise my liberty as a guest of ALWAC. Ambassador, thank you, first of all, for being here and speaking. It's an interesting topic and interesting expression of your thoughts and much experience. Recently, I think it was today, but it might have been yesterday, I heard that Iran has made an offer, I don't know if it's a request or an offer, to join the Abraham Accords. I don't know if you heard that. I'd be interested in your thoughts about that being a first, obviously, and what resistance from other Arab countries, or possibly Israel or the United States, would there be to such an offer or request?
I think what you heard was our president musing in his press conference, as he sometimes tries to drift off the topic a little bit and into other areas. He said at some point Iran could be a member of the Abraham Accords. I've not heard that from any Iranians. And I think it's fairly distant. I think a lot would have to change within Iran politically before they would feel that they could take that step. So I don't think there's a very early prospect. On the other hand, before the Iranian Revolution, the Israelis and Iranians got along fine. You can say what you want about the Shah's regime, but they got along. They recognized each other as substantial states in the region. And I want to emphasize that Iran does not consider itself part of the Middle East, but it certainly affects substantially the Middle East. So I think, as I said in my remarks, I think we've got to find a way out of this cul-de-sac that we're in with Iran. And I think there is a way, but it's we've been away from Iran so long that we just don't have in my view, we just don't have the ability to make good judgments, and they don't have the ability to make good judgments either about intentions and possibilities. And so it's going to be a long process.
Jeremy, question out in Zoom land?
Yes, thanks. Thanks for your presentation. What about the prospects of opposition within Israel to the Netanyahu administration? What have we learned about the degree of opposition and the possibility of change within Israel?
I think the Prime Minister, had a cabinet meeting in Israel late this afternoon. It's Tuesday, isn't it? Yeah, he just flew back from Washington and had a late afternoon cabinet meeting, and I have not seen reports of that, but people expected that there would be some fireworks. There are ministers in his government that absolutely oppose what he has agreed to. And the conjecture is that Netanyahu knows this, it's no secret to him, but at this point he feels like his government is tottering on the brink anyway. So if it goes over, he would be in a better position to be reelected because he's gotten back on track on ending the war and bringing the hostages home. And I've got to say about Netanyahu, who I've been, had considerable contact with, whatever you think of his politics, he's a masterful tactician. And, he loves the tactics, he loves the game, and he loves staying in the game. And he's going to do anything he can to stay in the game. But don't underestimate the guy. I don't like him. I think he's a glib, sometimes ugly person, but he's a masterful tactician. He is not one of the great Israeli leaders. He's not Shimon Peres. He's not Yitzhak Rabin. These are the greats, even Sharon, compared is a demigod compared with Bibi, but Bibi is a survivor, as is obvious. He's been around forever. And I don't expect him to disappear soon. And this latest thing with the president yesterday, I think helps him a lot. lends him some legitimacy that he was fast losing, not only in his own country, but around the world.
Thank you.
Sorry, I was talking to them. I should have been talking to you. Disoriented here.
No, talking to the audience in the room is perfectly correct.
All right. What's that accent, Michael?
I'm from
Jeremy.
I'm from the deep south of England,
All right.
but I've got a sore throat at the moment, so my voice may be a bit sexier than usual.
All right. Well, it's a nice one. I thought maybe it's AI generated. Who else?
If I may, sir, one of the highlights of my time in the Air Force was a chance to serve as the senior military official at the State Department and reinforce what I had already gained over the years, which is tremendous respect for the people in your profession who are professional diplomats and out there every day around the world doing this job. For that reason, I have been concerned as I have seen over the years, it seems like attack may be too strong a word, but tearing down a lot of the capability that we've built up in the State Department over the years. Let me ask your frank take on where we are now in terms of our professional diplomatic corps and what we need to do.
Well, in general, I think public service is under attack. And it's obvious. I mean, DOGE comes in and arbitrarily closes down USAID. There was no interest in improving USAID. There was no interest in taking the elements that worked and keeping them, throwing out the old. It was a political attack on public service, that there was an easy target. People don't, in Alabama or Colorado, where I grew up, they don't say, we're going to vote for this guy because he supports USAID, foreign aid. Foreign aid, which is a minuscule part of the US government budget, is still an easy thing to beat up on. So we do. But I think the State Department, there are two things I would say. It's an insular occupation. People don't understand what we do, and we don't talk about it enough. We don't get out with audiences like this one and tell you what we're doing enough. And State Department needs to do more of that. There's also a misunderstanding now, I think, that somehow we are partisans. I mean, I mentioned I've worked for 6 presidents. They weren't all Democrats, they weren't all Republicans, but I worked for them equally hard. I was appointed by a Republican. I don't profess to be a Republican, but I was as loyal to that president as any other. And I think that's what people have lost, that public service, you sign up for the country, you don't sign up for the person. So that's a tragedy, and that's hard to rebuild. It's hard to rebuild the trust. It's hard to rebuild the organizations. It's hard to rebuild the expertise. So, in my view, we're stepping on our own tail here.
Other questions in the room?
Come on, I need something a little more contentious. I don't have any adrenaline moving here yet. Come on.
Jeremy, on your end?
Yeah, one of the questions that's come up in, I think, New York Times, an opinion piece today, was that you can't impose a settlement colonial style by bringing in Trump and Blair from outside the Middle East and having them oversee an agreement with multiple countries that this isn't going to work. It's not generated from within the Middle East. How do you respond to that idea of imposing a peace from outside?
I think it's an interesting point, and I marvel at Tony Blair's involvement in this, because when I was in London, I was there after Blair was out of power, and Blair was just despised by the British. I mean, they thought he drug us into the Iraq War. He believed those Americans, and turns out it was all a bunch of hogwash. And Tony Blair, to this day, demonstrators gather when he gives a speech in London and try to shout him down. So Tony Blair is not popular in his own country, so I can see why he gets out, more. But he's an intelligent man, and I think he'll be an asset. The question is more important, though, as you said, Jeremy, is this imposed by the United States or Britain? I don't think it is. I think what it reflects is something I talked about, the fact that a lot of Arab states, even those who don't have formal relations, have accepted Israel's role in the region. They don't see any interest in this conflict continuing. They have genuine sympathy for the Palestinians, but more than anything else, they love stability. The Arab states' mantra is keep it boring. You know, when an Egyptian prime minister, or Egyptian president wakes up in the morning, his first thought is seeing President Sadat shot. I don't want that to happen to me. That's his objective. I'm still around, that's success. The country is stable, whether it's prospering, whether it's free, whether it's liberal democracy. Now there's a fancier version of that in the Gulf, where they have the money to keep their citizens happy without repressing them for the most part. It's not universal, but in a place like UAE or Qatar, everybody lives high off the hog. And so the population has great services, they have great educational opportunities, they have great housing. It's a paternalistic monarchy, basically, these countries. But stability for them, if you're a monarchy, stability again is crucial. So a place like the United Arab Emirates, just the leadership of that country cannot stand the Muslim Brotherhood, and they consider Hamas the Muslim Brotherhood, and they know that those people will kill them if they allow them to, or they at least believe they will. So they are very dedicated to achieving stability. So I think we need to look at this a little bit differently, Jeremy, now in this environment where Israel's legitimacy has grown, especially among the Gulf Arabs, with UAE in the lead, and Qatar with, even though they had this little tiff, Qatar has diplomatic relations without saying it with Israel. Saudi Arabia, to some extent, there are communication channels, and all these states have sort of worked through the neuroses of dealing with Israel and dealing with Israeli-Palestinian issues. So I think you're seeing the beginnings, and it could be only the beginnings, could be a false start of a new way of handling some of these regional situations. It may not fly in Israel, it may not fly in the Arab states, but it's a different approach that frankly I did not see in my career or any of the time I worked in the Middle East.
Any other questions? Oh, Rena.
I just wanted to ask sort of a human question here. It shouldn't be hard to keep in your mind that what happened when Israel was attacked was a horrible, horrible thing. And yet, it also shouldn't be hard to keep in your mind that what is happening now in Gaza is a horrible, horrible thing. And the polls show that support for Israel among the American people is diminishing. How are we supposed to, as human beings, see what's going on there and watch what's going on and not know what to do about it?
Well, first of all, I think you already are doing the right thing. You're looking at the human cost of these things. So that's a start. I mean, and I say that because some people don't. I mean, in Israel, there have been polls that say that a vast majority of Israelis consider that there are no innocent people in Gaza. And that's a troubling thing in so many ways, but it's what this conflict can engender, this kind of a conflict. And there are counterparts on the Palestinian side. There's no good Jew or good Israeli. So, we have to figure out how to sort of counteract that. And I think one of the ways we do it is through just understanding these places better. I think going there, seeing it for yourself is critical. I mean, my wife and I took a trip to Israel a couple of years ago, and I think she would tell you that it's much different than reading about it in the newspaper. And we went to the West Bank as well, and that was enlightening. But I think going there, talking to people, engaging across your own community is important. I think telling, I'm a believer in old-fashioned politics. If you've got a beef, you should tell your congressperson. If you think something we're doing or something's going on, you tell them, you tell your senators. And they may listen, they may not, but, good old-fashioned politics is one way of getting your views across. So I think that's important. I mean, these kids that are demonstrating, I think a lot of them are emotional and misguided. They ignore history of the area and so forth, but they give a damn. They care, and they're out there. And I can see myself as a kid, thinking about Vietnam in the same way, the same sort of partly informed views, immature, inexperienced, young, where you see the world in black and white, but they're out there. And they've had an effect on public opinion all over the world. So it's, I can't say that there's any magic formula, and I can't say that we are going to, any of these particular plans are going to change this situation, but I hope I got across that peace between Arabs and Israelis is not impossible. I mean, I've seen it. I've seen, in the mid-90s after the Oslo Accords, we had a whole range of activities to support the Palestinian-Israeli relations with multilateral efforts with Arab countries, including Saudi Arabia and 10 or 12 others, along with Israel. I've seen that. I was involved in that directly. I led a working group on water resources in the Middle East, Arabs, Israelis, all working together. No big neuroses at that time. Now, they all realized that they were supporting a Palestinian-Israeli process, that they wanted to succeed. But they were doing that, and they were giving Israel confidence that it could do that because they were talking to them. So that was important. And I've seen, in negotiations, I've seen Israeli and Palestinian intelligence chiefs huddled in a corner talking about how to solve a particular problem. This is not impossible. They know each other. I mean, the Palestinians and Israelis know each other intimately. When I first started working in that area, often had to go from Egypt up through Israel or through Gaza into Israel, just as part of my work. We'd get in a car, we'd drive up to the border, go through Gaza, go into Israel, and it was routine. People would go to Gaza to get their cars fixed from Israel. They'd go to the beach. This is unimaginable now, but it isn't unimaginable because it happened. So I think we need to keep in mind that nothing is, just because we haven't seen it or it hasn't happened recently, doesn't make it impossible.
And that is a great note to end on. Please, big hand for Ambassador.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Thank you again, gentlemen, for coming out this evening. Reminder, the next program that we have on the books is November 4th currently, and that is with Dr. Michael Slobodchikov. It's a program on Russia, and it'll be an opportunity for a book signing too. More to come on that, and more to come on the December program on Greenland with Dr. Pfeiffer from Air University. Thank you all again for coming out, and have a good evening.